Got a little project I'm going to show you guys. Got the plastics off of my vintage 1970s Bird made by Phoenix Engineering three-wheeler. And we bought this thing many years ago. I paid 25 bucks for the complete three-wheeler, not running, from my dad's old neighbor. And this is the bike that my brothers and I all learned to ride on. And as you can see, we were not terribly nice to it. It's had a rough life. We've been holding it together with pop rivets and aluminum for years. These things are pretty rare. I've only ever seen, I think, 4 of them. One of them is ironically for sale right down the road for me, but for 900 bucks, not worth getting it just for the plastics. So I'm going to fix this one up best I can, because my boys are going to learn to ride on this thing. Plus, I'm still going to jump on this thing, take it for a spin once in a while. I love this little thing. So anyways, I'm going to show you a cheap hack on how to get your plastics to at least stay together for a while. Way better than the pop rivets, because as you can see, the pop rivets, wherever you put it back together, it still has stress where it's not supported. This piece of aluminum stops here, so that's right where the crack started. And this is the second piece of aluminum. You can see from the old holes, the old one used to stop there, and that's where that crack started. And it's done the same thing over here. So we're going to get this patch back together the redneck white trash way. So here I just got some standard 14 gauge tie wire. I'm going to grab me about a 4-inch long piece. And it really doesn't matter what type of pliers you use. I just happen to have these little 90-degree nose ones. We're going to crimp it, roll it up 90 degrees each side, turn it 180, 180. I'm going to grab across these 2 points, roll the tails up like that. So the idea being, where the plastics are cracked is going to be this flat piece right here. That'll line up on the crack, and then we're going to have these 2 loops that are going to grab into the plastic. What we're going to do is grab onto this with a pair of pliers down here, heat this end up with a MAP gas torch, and then we're going to press it into the plastic over the top of the crack, and that's going to force weld the plastic together and give it some body using this piece of steel as strength. Now I realize this is only 14 gauge. I have seen there's a company that makes a tool for doing this, and it uses like basically paperclip material, and I've used paper clips to do it before. I mean, that's paperclip bent up, basically the same thing. All depends on the thickness of the metal you got, because you want a little bit of thermal mass here that's going to heat up and stay hot, so that as it melts in, you can actually push it into the plastic. And what you're trying to do is actually submerge this in the plastic. Once it's in, you can cut the tails off, take a die grinder and just face it off nice and smooth. If you want to get really fancy, you can come back in with soldering iron, a flat tip, and roll the plastic over the top of it if it didn't submerge all the way. And we'll wait for that to cool down, because the plastic is hot enough right here. It's all liquefied. It's actually swolled up a little bit towards the heat side. That's why I'm doing it on the underside instead of the front. You'll barely be able to see a little bit of maybe a heat distortion on the other side, but this ain't no show quality fixing. This is just good enough. I mean, my kids are gonna beat this thing just like I did. And when I do these, I've fixed a couple plastics over the years like this. See how it's still moving just a little bit? You gotta wait for it to cool down a little bit more. When I do these, this is just to get you by. I mean, something like this, there's obviously people that can plastic weld and fix this up, make it perfect and new. And a lot of people would rather just buy new plastics, but vintage three-wheeler slash mini bike, there's no parts available for these things at all. Like I said, I've only seen very few of them over the years. But anyways, so we'll stack one of these about every half an inch, work our way up the crack, and then we'll cut all of the wires off and get it faced off, get it cleaned up. Even if you come to a point like this where there's a crack right in the middle of a bend, you got all your little pre-bent pieces here. Obviously they're straight. Don't be afraid to just put a little bit of a bend into it, just until it kind of fits that contour. And then we'll heat it up and stick it in. Bend up a couple more and we'll work our way across there. And it's pretty much going to look like, well, after you trim, looks a little bit gnarly. This all going to get ground down. Before you trim, looks like a porcupine that had a bad hair day. But it is now all one piece again, minus the piece that's missing. Not much I can really do about that. All the edges are pretty nice and flush. Got a little hang up there where the plastic's dinged up, but we'll file that off. We got one more step and we'll have this looking pretty good. A little bit of nose candy. I'm just kidding. That's baking soda. And that's super glue. You put the two together, especially on a piece of plastic or wood or a lot of different surfaces, it will harden up like a rock. Even though this is plastic and we want it to remain somewhat flexible, what I do is just fill in the crack with some baking soda. I use a feeler gauge. I can just trickle it in there, and then I use a feeler gauge to smooth it off. And then, if I can get super glue open, and then you just trickle it like one drop at a time, right on top of the super glue. It doesn't take much. And this does work way better if you use a thin super glue. I'm actually running super thin. You can see it soaks right in. And I'm watching on the back side, I can see excess super glue drip out. And when it hits baking soda, it is instantly dried. And maybe if you had a whole bunch of super glue right there, you know, like a real thick line, you can also use Extreme Power Accelerator. You can buy both of these at Hobby Lobby. And that's all it takes. That little bit, that super glue is completely dry. And when you use super glue and baking soda, it creates heat, and a lot of it. Don't be surprised if you get a little chemical smoke coming off of there. Now I'm going to go through and fill up every one of these cracks, get them all glued up. Now if you got spots where, you know, an old rivet hole, screw hole, or even a big spot where your baking soda just falls through, just grab yourself some green masking tape, slap it on the bottom, fill it up with your baking soda, super glue over the top. And there we go. Everything's glued up. We're all stitched together on the inside. Now from there with the super glue, you can block that down. You could give it a skim coat of Bondo. You can smooth it off, lay on a layer of fiberglass, whatever you want to do. But it's all back to one piece. And yeah, that's how I fix them up. Now, like I said, my kids are going to beat the snot out of this thing just like I did. So I'm not concerned about making it pretty, because I actually just found out there's a guy that sells fiberglass bodies for this. So maybe later on down the road, if I want to restore it, make it super nice, because the frame's very nice and clean, basically just needs wheels, and it'll look pretty good. But for my boys to learn on, this will do just dandy. Thanks for watching.